revealed. How a lonely cowboy changed everything for a brave girl, escaping a decisive marriage. Jake rode through the golden fields of his family's vast Texas ranch, the gallop of his horse echoing against the silence he felt creeping over him like a heavy fog. The wind whispered secrets, stories of his parents, passion and warmth etched in the rustling grass, memories that now felt unattainable. At 35, he was a rugged cowboy, but with every empty sunrise, he felt the weight of 1,000 heartaches slipping through his fingers. Loneliness gnawed at his insides, darkness lurking just beneath the surface as he remembered the laughter that once filled the air, now replaced by the aching silence. As he rode, Jake hesitated, the sight of a distant dust cloud flickering with life. A rodeo was happening in town. Part of him yearned to go, craving the laughter, the chatter, and the pulse of the community. But the thought of facing the familiar eyes that judged him, always watching, left him feeling raw inside. The pressure mounted, suffocating. He had buried his dreams deep inside, but now they clawed at his consciousness. Was it easier to remain miserable than open himself up for disappointment once more? Across town, Sarah's heart raced as she meticulously folded her husband's shirts, each crisp fold a reminder of the box her life had become. Sealed in a loveless marriage, she felt her vibrant spirit dimming under the drab weight of expectations. Her ambitions faded into the background, overshadowed by the constant hum of domesticity. She fought against the urge to scream. Could she dare to disrupt the fragile fabric of her life, to taste the freedom that whispered to her on the wild winds? Gathering her courage, Sarah made up her mind and broke free from the predictable life she loathed, the longing for independence consuming her thoughts. The rodeo became her escape route, a chance to reclaim the pieces of herself she thought she had lost. But with that liberation came fear. What if she faltered? The thrill of stepping into the unknown paralleled the fear of stepping away from the familiar. As Jake finally rode into town, he felt the familiar itch of something unsaid, a magnetic pull toward the center of it all. There she was, fiery and determined, her laughter mingling with others, igniting something dormant within him. They exchanged stories that night, shadows of their pasts reflecting in each other's eyes, but the weight of the town's judgment pressed in. Each shared moment felt like a risk, whispers of disapproval swarming around them. The unyielding expectations suffocated Sarah's dreams, yet Jake's presence brought a glimmer of hope. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. But just as their connection began to blossom, trouble brewed on the horizon. A sudden drought devastated the ranch, slicing through Jake's hope. And then fear flooded him. As the ranch faltered, a desperate call for help echoed in his mind. In Sarah, he remembered the brightness that first drew him in. She had once been a researcher, intelligent and resourceful. What if they teamed up? Perhaps together they could reignite the flame of his family's legacy. But Sarah's past loomed like thunderclouds, threatening to unearth old wounds her heart had kept buried. Torn between her newfound independence and a heavy secret that could shatter her world, anticipation cut through her like a blade. Was she truly ready to break free, to confront her overpowering fears, or was she only setting herself up for disappointment? As tensions thickened and darkness encroached on their fragile bond, the question hung in the air. Could Jake and Sarah brave the tempests of revelations, threatening the lives they dared to reshape? With the setting sun painting the Texas horizon in shades of uncertainty, They found themselves at a crossroads formidable enough to unravel everything they thought they knew about freedom, love, and the weight of their buried truths. Jake stood alone in the dusky quiet of his ranch, the weight of drought pressing down like a suffocating blanket. His mind raced, caught in a whirlwind of urgency and despair. The very land that had nurtured his family was parched, and the crops were wilting under the relentless sun. He needed a plan, a lifeline that would bring the ranch back to life. That lifeline, he realized, might just be Sarah. The thought jolted through him as he touched the rough surface of an old wooden fence post, grounding himself. They had shared a spark that evening, but now it felt more like a beckoning flame. Would she be willing to step out of her comfort zone to help him save his family's legacy? The fear of rejection clutched at his chest. He'd have to tread carefully. If he pushed too fast, he risked losing the little connection they had formed. As he prepared to approach Sarah, a cocktail of emotions surged within him: excitement, hope, and fear of vulnerability. Jake took a deep breath and mounted his horse. The evening ride into town was filled with adrenaline, each thud of hooves echoing his resolve. The rodeo had nudged them together before. Maybe it would be the setting for a more profound connection this time. Meanwhile, Sarah was pacing in her small kitchen, her hands trembling as she wiped down the counter. The solitude had become a comforting prison, and the mere thought of stepping into the world outside filled her with a hurricane of dread and exhilaration. There was a spark, an electric current in the air the night she'd met Jake. Memories of their conversation ignited and faded, but one thought remained. Could she truly embrace her dreams while confronting a past that haunted her? Deciding to confront her fears, Sarah stepped outside, the whispering breeze reminding her that life was waiting just beyond her doorstep. She spotted Jake dismounting near the old barn where they had shared laughter and stories. An image formed in her mind. What if they joined forces? But that thought tangled with another dark one. What if her failures tainted his hope? Jake's eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. She sensed his urgency, a shared struggle carving a bond stronger than both their fears. He approached. The determination etched on his rugged face mirrored her own resolution. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady yet laced with vulnerability, "I need your help. I believe we can turn things around. Together." The challenge leapt from his lips, and Sarah's heart raced. This was her moment of truth. Could she risk everything, including her heart, by entwining her fate with his? Those quiet nights spent folding shirts and wondering if this was all there was became a distant memory against the demands of the present. "Jake, I have to confess something," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't know if I can contribute meaningfully. I'm still grappling with my own chains." His brow furrowed in concern, but there was an undeniable spark of encouragement in his eyes. "We all have chains to confront, but I believe in your strength. I've seen it in you." Those words settled deep within her, challenging her to face not just the remnants of a broken marriage, but the unlimited potential that lay dormant inside her. Was she truly ready to reclaim her essence and face the source of her fears? Their silence lingered as the sun dipped low, signaling that the time was running out. The drought threatened not just Jake's ranch, but also the very essence of their ambitions. The stakes were higher than ever. "Let's brainstorm," he suggested, determination glimmering like the first stars emerging in the twilight. As they stepped along the path toward uncharted territory, uncertainty curled at the edges of their resolve. Would they expand beyond mere survival, or would their pasts unravel everything they built? The question hung heavy, leaving them teetering at the cusp of newfound dreams, poised to confront the heavy truths looming over them. With visions of the horizon where their struggles could fuse into something greater, they began to sketch a way forward. But would it be enough? Or would their tangled threads come unraveled when tested against reality's fierce tides? Jake stood at the base of the old barn, the fading light casting long shadows that mirrored the uncertainties swirling in his heart. Together, they could either transform his family's struggling ranch or let their fears pull them apart. A surge of ambition ignited within him as he studied Sarah. The fear in her eyes could easily be misconstrued as weakness, but he recognized it for what it was, a gateway to something greater. "Let's focus on what we can do," he said, a strategy more than a suggestion. "We need to assess the land, find out what's salvageable, and set a plan in motion." Her gaze flickered to the horizon, which now shimmered with dying sunlight. The world seemed vast, yet claustrophobic at that moment. "What if we fail?" she asked, her voice trembling as if the words themselves held the weight of her past. "It's about trying," Jake replied, meeting her eyes with conviction. "This drought isn't just a test of our land, it's a test of us. We won't know our limits until we push through them." She nodded slowly, absorbing the thrust of his words. It was easy to remain entrenched in familiar fears, but Jake's call to action urged her to confront the very shackles that had kept her in the shadows for so long. With renewed determination, Jake led the way, moving effortlessly from task to task. He began with the fields, fervently checking each patch of soil, evaluating the possibility of crop revival. Sarah followed, silent but observant, allowing herself to absorb his focus and dedication. Under his watch, her insecurities started to dissipate as she found herself critiquing the land alongside him, her opinion strengthening with every insight shared. "Look here." She gestured towards a cluster of wild grasses growing defiantly among the dry earth. "This might be an indicator of better soil deeper down. If we amend here, it could help." "Yes!" Jake beamed, the excitement transforming his steadfast demeanor. "You're actually seeing what's beyond the surface." For the first time, Sarah felt the stirrings of confidence. Each suggestion she made captured Jake's attention and earned her respect. He leaned into her insight, valuing her contributions, and it empowered her to offer more. The fear began to morph into something palpable. What if she was capable of more than she ever believed? But doubt lingered at the corners of her mind, whispering reminders of failure. During a break, as Jake took a swig of water, she turned to him, her brow furrowing with vulnerability. "Jake, I'm terrified. What if I can't follow through? What if I let you down?" He paused, setting down the water bottle with gentle care. "Then we face it together. You can't let potential struggles overshadow the progress we've made. Each step forward, even the missteps, are learning experiences." His words struck her deeply, filling her with both dread and exhilaration. For the first time, the thought of defining her identity independently of her past didn't seem daunting. It appeared invigorating. As dusk settled in, they sat against the barn, their silhouettes framed by a sky bursting with stars. The silence was thick, yet electric, charged with emerging possibilities. "Jake," Sarah hesitated, forcing back the fear clawing at her throat. "Can I really be a part of this? This is your legacy, and I don't want to tarnish it." His gaze softened. "You're not a burden, Sarah. You're what's going to help me turn this ranch around." Suddenly, a chilling thought pierced through the moment. What if her self-doubt held more power than their commitment? As they leaned into the task ahead, the stakes grew clear. Not only their dreams were at risk, but their newly forged bond hung in the balance. "Let's get started with the initial game plan tomorrow," Jake said, breaking the tension, and Sarah nodded, her internal battle raging still. What lay ahead was an uncharted territory of hope, vulnerability, and a commitment to fighting their fears. But would they prevail, or would her history of letting herself down write a different ending? With the night deepening around them, both were left to confront what tomorrow would hold, and the looming uncertainty of their determination twisted painfully in Sarah's chest. Everything hinged on their next steps, making the path ahead both a promise and a threat. As dawn broke, streaks of orange and pink flooded the sky, pushing the remnants of night away. Jake felt invigorated by the crisp air, the chill energizing him for the day ahead. He stood by the barn, envisioning the plans they had sketched out the night before, a strategy that felt both ambitious and attainable. Sarah emerged from the barn, her hair tousled and eyes still heavy with sleep, but beneath the surface he sensed an undercurrent of determination. "Ready?" he asked, studying her carefully. She hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "Ready." Just that simple word held a weight that reverberated in the stillness between them. It was a declaration, an oath to herself. Today was the day they would begin to reclaim the land, and with it, a piece of themselves. They started with the most affected area of the ranch, tasked with rediscovering life in the parched earth. Sarah found herself more in tune with the land than she had ever anticipated. Each touch of soil seemed to pull at her consciousness. She sensed its history, its struggle. As they dug into the rugged ground, she became acutely aware of the connection she was forging, not only with the ranch, but with her own identity. "I've discovered some resources we could tap into," Jake said, breaking her thoughtful reverie. He unfolded a makeshift map. "I've researched drought-resistant crops. What do you think?" Sarah leaned over, her fingers tracing the lines of his plan. His passion was infectious, urging her to step further into her own. "I think we should diversify, maybe find a local co-op to get ideas. We can't just plant one kind of crop and hope. It's too high risk." Jake's eyes lit up with admiration. "Exactly. That's the spirit. We need adaptability." The rush of collaboration washed away lingering doubts, allowing Sarah to step firmly into her role. They called local nurseries, engaging in conversations that revealed her surprising knack for negotiation. Each obstacle, cracked soil, unanswered phone calls, became a learning opportunity rather than a setback. However, self-doubt would not lay still. Late in the afternoon, fatigue began to seep into her bones, accompanied by the intrusive whispers of her apprehensions. What if they were making a grave mistake? What if this hope was merely a fantasy? Jake seemed to sense her faltering spirit. "Let's take a break, Sarah. Breathe. We're making progress every minute we spend on this." "Jake, I've never really been involved at this level before," she confessed, her vulnerability creeping into her voice. "What if I screw this up? What if I ruin everything?" He paused and looked at her, his expression serious yet kind. His words were steady and thoughtful. "You won't ruin this, but if we do fail, we'll face it together. That's the key. The fear of failure shouldn't paralyze you. It should ignite a fire inside you. Use it." His conviction sent ripples through her. As shadows stretched long across the field, a different kind of determination gripped Sarah, seducing her away from her fears. Could she really let go of the shackles of her past? Together, they had already begun to create change. That reality felt like a dawn, breaking inside her soul. With renewed vigor, they continued to work late into the sunset. The air buzzed with possibilities as they projected images of the ranch in bloom, fields ripe with promise. Sarah's laughter burst through the tension, surprising even herself. Yet just as she felt the warmth of their burgeoning partnership, a nagging thought crashed into her elation. What awaited them beyond this phase? She glanced at Jake, whose face was lit with pride and hope. Could she maintain this momentum? The shadows of her previous failures crept back, casting doubts of potential stagnation. As they stood side by side, the unfinished map of their aspirations before them, the weight of the unknown pressed down anew. "Jake, what's next?" she finally asked, a tremor of anxiety hiding beneath her confident facade. "The plan doesn't stop here," he replied, a contemplative gleam in his eyes. We'll need to rally support from the community. It's time to really make our intentions known. Are you in? The challenge loomed larger than before, inviting her to step on a path that could either solidify her newfound identity or plunge her back into obscurity. How far would I have to go? She thought, the stakes rising with each word. Could she really become a steward of her future and of this ranch? With each answer looming on the horizon, the question now was not just about agricultural revival, but about her role in the transformative journey ahead, and whether she had what it took to embrace it fully. As night wrapped its velvet cloak around the ranch, Sarah lay awake, her mind racing despite her heavy eyelids yearning for rest. The shadows in her room seemed to breathe, echoing the uncertainty that loomed over her. The decision to step out into the community felt daunting, as if she were preparing to cross a canyon without a safety net. Every inch of her being was telling her to retreat, yet the embers of determination ignited a fierce resolve within her. Morning arrived too soon, the sun flirting with the horizon as she made her way out to the barn. Watching Jake delve into their plans fueled both excitement and anxiety. Each stroke of his pencil on the paper seemed to embody a vision where she could be more than just a reluctant partner. She could be a leader, a pioneer in her own right. As she approached him, she took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill her lungs and clear her mind. "Jake, I've been thinking," she began, hesitating only briefly. "What if we organize a meeting at the diner this weekend? We could invite some locals and share our ideas. Make them part of this vision." Jake looked up, surprise mingling with admiration in his eyes. "That's brilliant, Sarah, but are you ready for that?" "Even if it terrifies me, I think it's necessary. If we're going to build something lasting, we need buy-in, trust. Maybe it's a step in showing I'm committed to this, and to us," she added with quiet determination. His smile ignited something warm within her. "I'm here for it, but you're going to need to be at the forefront. These people are going to want to hear from you." The thought sent an involuntary shudder through her. Presenting her ideas meant exposing her vulnerability. Would her enthusiasm stand up to scrutiny? She could feel the stirrings of doubt, whispering reminders of her past failures, but she pushed them down. This was her moment to shine, to rally not just the ranch, but her very self. As the meeting day approached, Sarah immersed herself in preparation. She drafted notes, sketches, and visual aids, pouring every ounce of her being into articulating a dream that felt as fragile as it was vibrant. Yet, with each passing day, the gnawing insecurity chipped away at her confidence. Would her voice resonate? Could she motivate others to join their cause? Friday evening arrived, bringing with it an unexpected storm. The rain lashed against the windows, amplifying her unease as she stood at the diner door, watching the droplet patterns race down the glass. People would come despite the weather, but confidence was a curious beast, one that had taken flight far from her grasp. The obscure puddles outside mirrored the turbulence of her emotions, calm on the surface, yet roiling beneath. Jake arrived, his usual easy demeanor contrasting sharply with her inner turmoil. "Ready?" he inquired gently, but the question hung heavily in the air. "I don't know," she admitted, a quiver in her voice. "What if I can't make them believe in this? In us?" He stepped closer, his presence anchoring her momentarily. "Then you show up anyway. You're not asking them to believe in something unattainable. You're sharing a vision. It's yours." As they entered, the storm's rumble faded into the background, replaced by murmurs of surprise and curiosity from the half-filled diner. The warmth and chatter brought life, but also the weight of expectation. Sarah stood at the makeshift podium they had created, her heart pounding in sync with the low hum of conversations, each face a potential ally or critic. She opened her mouth to speak, feeling the flood of nerves surging as the eyes settled on her. With every word, she stepped deeper onto uncharted terrain, where faltering might mean failure, but rising meant redemption. When we think about the future of this land, we think about more than just crops, she started, her voice steadying. We think about ourselves, about community, about legacy. As her confidence began to build, she noticed how the crowd leaned in, intrigued. The storm outside morphed into something almost distant. This moment was hers. But amidst the building momentum, a flicker of doubt surfaced. A feeling that someone was watching her with skepticism, questioning her every word. It was then it hit her brutally. The realization that challenges awaited her beyond this moment. Real opposition from those who didn't believe in change. And just as recognition dawned, a familiar figure emerged from the back of the diner, his face set in a mask of disapproval. "Sarah," he sneered, cutting through the fabric of her speech. "What makes you think you're capable of any of this?" The sudden confrontation sent ripples of tension through the room, and Sarah felt her bravado slip. The path ahead had become twisted, and the stakes were about to reveal themselves in ways she had never anticipated. Would she falter and retreat into the shadows of old doubts, or find the strength to push back against this confrontation? As she stood there, caught between the desire to defend her emerging identity and the fear of her past failures, Sarah suddenly realized that this moment could either bind her to her fears or set her free. The diner had descended into a charged silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah's heart raced, thrumming in her ears like a distant drum, drowning out the cacophony of the storm outside. She could feel cold beads of sweat form along her brow, the weight of the room settling heavily on her shoulders. Her legs felt rooted to the floor, paralyzed by the challenge that stood in front of her. Yet inside, a tempest brewed, a deep-seated need to reclaim her narrative. "Why do you think you're capable of any of this?" he repeated, stronger now, each syllable laced with derision. The man was Thomas, a local rancher whose skepticism was as notorious as his disdain for outsiders trying to reshape their way of life. Sarah's mind raced, sifting through the myriad of emotions: fear, anger, determination. She could turn and retreat, allowing him to cage her with old insecurities, or she could confront him, standing tall against the current that threatened to sweep her away. "I believe in this vision because I've lived through stagnation and fear," she said, her voice finding a steadiness that surprised even her. "I want to create a future, not just for me, but for all of us who come from this land. We have to evolve if we want to thrive." Thomas crossed his arms, unimpressed. "Evolve? That's a nice way to say you want to change what's been working just fine for years. People like me don't take kindly to change, especially when someone gets ideas above their station." The room buzzed with murmurs, voices flickering like candle flames, indecisive between empathy and allegiance to the familiar. But Sarah could feel the tide turning, her conviction rising from the shadows of her conflict. "You think I'm your enemy?" she shot back direct now. "But I'm one of you. I'm not trying to erase the past. I want to build on it. There's no strength in fear or ignorance. Isn't it time we dared to dream, to collaborate?" Her words hung in the air, an invitation wrapped in challenge, each one a flicker in the darkness. She could almost see the gears shifting in the crowd's expressions, curiosity sparking as they witnessed her audacity. With a deep breath, she leaned into the moment, ready to harness that energy. "You may not believe in my potential," she continued, meeting Thomas's gaze directly. "But what's really at stake here is the future of our ranches, our jobs, our families. And that's not something I'm willing to lose without a fight." A ripple of murmured support began to ripple through the diner. She could feel Jake's eyes on her, a sense of pride mixed with reassurance. Yet, the discord was palpable. Thomas snorted. "And you think shouting your ideals will change anything? The world doesn't run on dreams, girl. It runs on grit." "Grit?" she repeated, fired up, allowing the swell of passion to envelop her words. Grit is exactly what brings us here tonight. Our willingness to face uncertainty and embrace possibility. You know that as well as I do, Thomas. We can keep running our lives on old patterns or dare to forge new trails together. With that, the crowd shifted. A subtle wave of tension breaking as they considered her words. This was more than a battle with Thomas. It had morphed into a collective re-evaluation of their pasts and futures. Look around you, she urged. Every face here is ready for a change in some form. I'm not asking for the impossible. I'm asking us to put our heads together, to think outside the box we've built around ourselves. To her astonishment, a few nods of agreement began to punctuate the skepticism, her heart racing with newfound energy. Sarah had sparked something within the room that started as a flicker of hope, an idea that perhaps she could indeed lead. But Thomas's gaze didn't waver behind the weight of his doubts. Let's see if you can convince me then. He finally relented, crossing his arms, but with a hint of something more. For now, a challenge rather than outright dismissal. The sense of urgency clashed with Sarah's deep-seated fears. This was her moment, the heartbeat of change resonating in her core. Yet, beneath the thrill, a nagging uncertainty punctuated her resolve. How far could she truly go in changing minds hardened by traditions? Would her voice hold the weight necessary to sway the steadfast? As the energy in the diner shifted, Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to launch into the real meat of her vision. But within her, a tempest stirred. A question loomed larger than life itself. Could she maintain her newfound confidence in the face of the inevitable backlash? And was she ready to fight for her place, risking everything to turn possibility into reality? With a steadying lungful of air, Sarah began again, ready to capture this moment, but acutely aware that the battle was just beginning. Would the support she felt in that fleeting swell of hope materialize, or would she stand alone amid her dreams, echoing through the unforgiving silence of doubt? The diner buzzed with a tension that felt different now, charged with the hope she had ignited. Sarah noticed the details. The creased brows of those who were on the fence, the flicker of interest in the eyes of the younger generation, and even the faint nodding of some older patrons who had long ago buried their dreams beneath layers of dust. She could no longer mute the urgency swelling within her. The risk of silence felt more menacing than any disagreement. Let's talk about what we're afraid of, she pressed on, her voice cutting through the tension. Not just what could be lost, but what we might gain. Tell me, what are you afraid will happen if we try something new? This was a pivotal moment. A question that startled many from their complacency, beckoning them to weigh their fears against the potential for transformation. She watched Thomas as he flinched slightly, his defenses momentarily faltering. Perhaps, she thought, he wasn't immune to doubt. Of course, it was a tricky balance. The lines she was treading held tension, a push against tradition balanced delicately by the reverence for legacy. But Sarah knew that sometimes the hardest truths needed a direct confrontation, unfurling patiently toward acceptance. We fear it'll lead to uncertainty, Thomas finally replied, his voice more measured but still tinged with resistance. And uncertainty isn't something we can afford here. Uncertainty or stagnation? Sarah countered, her heart thrumming louder. What do you think happens when we remain stagnant? I've lived in that world, never imagining that I could seek more than just survival. Change invokes fear, yes, but so does indifference. We've suffered too long under the assumption that if we leave things be, they will stay the same. They won't. His arms unfolded just enough to reveal that he was considering her words, although his eyebrows still remained steeped in skepticism. Another diner patron, a middle-aged woman who had spent years mastering the art of resilience, spoke up. But what do you know of ranching? How can you make these decisions for us? Sarah felt the heat rise within, knowing that this question was a symptom of a larger concern. the hesitation rooted in her lack of experience in this world they knew inside and out. "You're right," she admitted quickly, allowing vulnerability to pierce through her uncertainty like a beacon. "I don't know every nuance, but I know about growth, about smart, sustainable practices. I know we can bring in innovation without dismantling what's already been built." The insinuation that her outsider viewpoint could hold worth ignited a spark in the woman's eyes, a glimmer of skepticism mingled with curiosity. "What could we actually change?" Jake chimed in. His face was earnest, and there was a flame of potential in his demeanor. "We've always done things a certain way. It's hard to imagine the alternatives. Imagine a future where we collaborate, where old wisdom meets new approaches. We can harness technologies, fortify the land, expand our markets, and introduce sustainable practices that could preserve our culture while ensuring we thrive. But we can't fear discovery. We have to step into it." At that moment, the emotional landscape shifted again. Her dream morphed into a shared possibility. Sarah could see the tide of acceptance rising, but she also felt the shadows of doubt circling. "Those on the sidelines, come forward," she continued, drawing in the silence that had enveloped the diner once more. "Tell me what you envision. I'm not here to dictate. I need you." One by one, people began to slowly express their thoughts, their concerns for the future, their fears of losing authenticity, but interwoven, there was a yearning for reassurance and growth. Each voice fortified her. But just as quickly as she felt the wave of support swell, there was a voice that brought her crashing back to reality. It was Thomas again, suddenly fierce. "And just what makes you think you have the experience to guide us? What makes you think you can lead a pack of stubborn ranchers like us?" The challenge echoed through the diner, severe and piercing. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. Her heartbeat quickened again, fear creeping in as self-doubt threatened to undo her progress. But in that moment, making a choice became clearer. The time had come for her to confront not just the crowd, but herself. She had endured the tugging weight of tradition before. She had almost succumbed to it yet again. "What I've realized is—" She hesitated, drawing on the wells of her experience. "It's not about what I have or don't have. It's about where we can go from here. And if that means I hold the torch for us to forge a new path together, then I'll do what it takes." The cadence of her voice steadied, an anchor. The diner felt charged again, filled with flickering possibilities, even as the threads of opposition persisted. Was she capable of rising to the occasion? Or would the fear of making a wrong step tether her back once more? As she locked eyes with Thomas, the challenge crystallized. There was no turning back. Would this anger turn him from a foe to an ally, or would it further entrench his resolve? The only certainty came with the realization that a deeper reckoning lay ahead, and with it, the path she was forging became illuminated by introspection and potential conflict. "Let's discover if I can sustain this vision," she said softly but firmly, both a question and a declaration, reshaping the narrative one step further into uncharted territory. The air thrummed with possibility, but now there loomed another question. Could she embrace the unknown fully, risking all she had uncovered and all she stood to gain? As silence settled in, Sarah braced herself. This was the moment her entire future hung upon. A deep stillness enveloped the diner, charged with a mixture of apprehension and hope, as stares shifted from Sarah to Thomas. He was no longer just a skeptical onlooker. He had become a formidable obstacle. Her heart raced as she weighed his challenge, the potent mix of fear and determination simmering just beneath the surface. In that volatile moment, she resolved to strip away the layers of doubt clouding their path forward. "Let's talk experience then," she said, her tone suddenly firm. "What have we built here if not a legacy rooted in hard work and innovation? Yes, I may not have spent my life in these fields, But I've seen businesses falter when they cling too tightly to tradition. We are all more adaptable than we believe. The diners exchanged glances, some intrigued, others hardened with skepticism. Sarah held her breath, praying that her appeal to common sense could pierce through the fog of tradition. Seeking a synergy of both their insights, she turned her gaze to the older patrons. You have so much history to draw from. Teach me. Let's refine your wisdom with the avenues I can open up. As she spoke, visible shifts occurred among those seated around her. The middle-aged woman from before leaned forward, her expression softening. What do you see, Sarah? Can you truly guide this ranch into the future? It was a lifeline thrown amid the swirl of uncertainty. Together, Sarah emphasized, we can investigate alternative methods that yield better crops and more resilient livestock. Think of how technological advancements in irrigation can enhance our farming, even during droughts. We can create a model that showcases tradition and progress hand in hand. The earnestness in her voice sparked a ripple of conversation. No, it wouldn't solve everything, but it opened a door. In some corners of the room, murmurs of agreement surfaced, nurtured by the tenacity she was beginning to unearth within herself. But her gaze kept returning to Thomas. She felt a connection electrifying the atmosphere between them, hinged on the same unyielding qualities they both possessed. With every heartbeat, she realized not only was she confronting him, but also the doubt looming in the edges of her mind. You think I lack the experience, but think about it, Thomas. Experience is not only about years clocked in a field. It's about recognizing potential where others see stagnation. And I'll stand by this idea, standing alongside you, even if it means facing breakdown after breakdown. She felt emboldened as she spoke, her emphasis on partnership ringing true. As her challenge sank into the diner, she read the nuances in Thomas's demeanor, his clenched jaw, the slight flare of nostrils. But she also caught a gleam in his eye, a flickering promise. He was still a fortress, but maybe, just maybe, the walls were beginning to crack. What if you crash and burn? He asked, his voice deep and defiant, yet the question held an undertone of vulnerability. What if your vision dissolves before your eyes, leaving us stranded? A silence hung heavily as her words hung in the air, suspended between fear and faith. But past the uncertainty, she felt a fire within her, a primal urge to rise to the challenge. Then we learn. But I'd rather risk failure trying to reach for something greater than withering away in complacency, waiting for the inevitable winds of change to force us. With that declaration, she stood tall. For the first time since entering that diner, the reflection of her resolve felt tangible. It echoed back at her from the faces around her, curious, concerned, but firmly rooted in the possibility of transformation. In that moment, something shifted. Sarah could see it in their expressions. For many, the fear was morphing into a flicker of excitement, a sliver of hope. However, her moment of triumph was rattled by the sharp realization still lurking under the surface. The journey ahead would demand far more than mere words. Yet there was one last obstacle. She recognized that Thomas still held sway over a substantial faction in the room. Would he step aside, retreating from his sharp opposition, or would his resolve harden against her emergence? As she locked eyes with him once more, it became inevitable that the next phase of her endeavor demanded a direct confrontation with more than just belief or passion. It would be about demonstrating efficacy. Tomorrow, she proclaimed, her heart pounding. I want to take you out to the fields. Let's explore potential together, beyond the shadows of fear. You, me, and the land. No illusions, only the truth of what's possible. The challenge loomed before her like a daunting mountain, the unknown sprawling outwards as she stepped forward. Would Thomas be open to this venture, or would he remain a gatekeeper to endeavor? Would they uncover shared dreams, or simply expose deeper rifts? As tension mounted again, Sarah braced herself. The diner buzzed, capacity for change swirling in the air. Her future hung delicately in the balance, bated breath poised on the edge of possibility. What awaited her in the fields could redefine everything. And yet, within the uncertainty loomed another question. Could she awaken not just her own potential, but force others, especially Thomas, to re-examine their own paths? The sun cast an orange hue over the sprawling fields as Sarah stepped outside the diner, her heart racing in time with the gentle breeze that swept across the landscape. Today would shape her future, maybe even the future of the ranch, beyond merely surviving. Armed with a mix of trepidation and excitement, she headed toward the farm. But today was not about just her aspirations. It was about dismantling the barriers that stood in the path of innovation. She spotted Thomas leaning against a barn, his arms crossed, exuding a stubborn aura that challenged her resolve. There was intensity in his gaze, a combination of scrutiny and expectation, and she knew he would not make this easy. But it was necessary. They stood on the brink of transformation, both personally and professionally. "Morning!" she called out, trying to inject warmth into her greeting, though the knot in her stomach suggested that she was about to confront the greatest challenge of her career. "Let's get to it," he replied, his tone matter-of-fact, an unintended invitation to dive into the depths of their crisis. They walked together into the depths of the farmland where rows of crops stood like sentinels, witnesses to the changes that had long been overdue. "What do you see?" she asked, scanning the fields. She needed to gauge his perceptions, to understand his viewpoint. He hesitated, his brows furrowing as he stared at the wilted corn. "Potential, yes, but only if you respect what we already have. It's easy to talk about technology and innovation. It's harder to integrate it without losing everything." His words struck her deeply, resonating with her own fears. She didn't want to lose the richness of tradition in chasing progress, but she craved the kind of growth that didn't just mark time, but fundamentally altered their prospects. She needed him to see that balance too. "Respect, then," she said thoughtfully, her voice steady. "Let's start by analyzing what's here. We don't need to abandon the past to embrace the future. What if we could enhance our yield to meet today's demands, while still honoring the roots?" Thomas paused, regarding her with curiosity. There was a flicker of something, interest, agreement, but it was fleeting, and doubt clenched her heart once more. "What does your method of analysis actually entail?" he probed, his eyes narrowing. Every question was a test, a mark against her credibility. She felt the weight of her inexperience pressing down, but a flicker of determination ignited in her. "I want us to collect data on our current practices, identify weaknesses, and explore alternatives together," she explained. "We can implement a pilot program alongside our traditional methods to measure outcomes without risking everything in one fell swoop." "We've always done it this way for a reason," he countered, his voice rising slightly, marking his territory. "What makes you think you can unravel that without just causing chaos?" The challenge sent electric pulses through her, but she pushed down the simmering panic and took a breath. She needed to stand solid before him, projecting the confidence she scarcely felt. The truth was, she had a plan, and that plan had a place for collaboration, not chaos. Because chaos might be what we need to spark innovation. I see it more as recalibration, an exploration, rather than a full-blown upheaval. A more resolute tone emerged as she replied, determined to hold her ground. "You can teach me everything that has worked, while I show you what hasn't." For the first time, a trace of uncertainty crossed Thomas's expression. The stark contrast between his hardened facade and her burgeoning passion was palpable, like a taut cable ready to snap the moment either of them made a wrong move. She sensed a pivotal moment. This was a connection that could open or close doors. "What if you're wrong?" he asked, testing the waters. Then we'll own that mistake together and pivot, she replied, the conviction in her words solidifying into a resolute commitment. His silence loomed heavy, but a shudder of realization coursed through her. This was more than just a field of crops. It was about acknowledging her own resilience and redefining her narrative against the backdrop of tradition. Each step forward, amid the uncertainty that surrounded her, was a step into her potential. But she needed more than his begrudging respect. She needed his full engagement. Thomas stepped back, contemplating, yet she could feel the tension pulsing between them, a challenge still unresolved. A vision of their future flickered in her mind's eye, but it seemed ever elusive, floating just beyond reach. "Let's see how well you can convince me," he finally said. And just like that, her heart raced anew. She had cracked the fortress, but the real work was yet to come. "Okay then," she replied, resolving to lay the foundation necessary for their mutual growth. "Let's get started on a plan you can trust." As she turned to begin the arduous task of unearthing possibilities hidden beneath the soil, a small doubt crept in. Was she truly prepared for the trials ahead? The challenge of convincing Thomas was only an opening. The question lingered. Could she rise to meet her own expectations and the ones he had set? With the sun now climbing the hills, she realized how close she was to unearthing not just agricultural potential, but a personal transformation that could redefine her place in this world. But the deeper change lay just beyond the horizon, a revelation that could either bring her to her knees or lift her higher than she ever dreamed. Uncertainty hung like the clouds above, pregnant with potential rain, waiting to erupt. As the sun dipped low over the Texas horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and fiery oranges, Sarah felt a surge of anticipation coursing through her veins. The ground beneath her feet had become a canvas for transformation, a metamorphosis not only for the ranch, but for herself. Days had turned into a whirlwind of plans, discussions, and undeniable hard work. With every seed planted and every strategy debated with Thomas, she chipped away at the barriers that had once held her captive. They had spent countless hours mapping out the intricate details of crop diversification, soil management, and sustainability practices. Slowly, Thomas's skepticism began to recede, yielding to the earnestness of their collaboration. It felt as if she had finally broken through the walls of doubt, hers and his. One afternoon, as they stood in a patch of the ranch that had once looked defeated and thirsty, Thomas turned to her, a smile breaking through his once stony demeanor. "You know, I underestimated you," he admitted, a hint of pride glistening in his eyes. "This plan has real potential." The words were a balm to Sarah's spirit, affirming her determination to reclaim her identity amid doubt and skepticism. She had transformed from a woman burdened by her past into a partner valued for her insights and contributions. They had become a formidable team, built on mutual respect and the shared vision of a ranch reborn. As the days rolled into weeks, they saw tangible changes take root. The experimental patches of drought-resistant crops flourished, surprisingly resilient against the unforgiving Texas sun. The ranch became a beacon of innovation amid the whispers of tradition. The local community started taking notice. Soon enough, skeptical faces transformed into curious expressions, transforming their chatter into conversations about involvement and the untapped potential within the ranch. The moment of truth arrived at the annual community meeting, where the pivotal decision-making for the future of the ranch would take place. As Sarah stood at the front of the crowded hall, with dozens of familiar faces watching her every move, the memories of her hesitant beginnings flooded back. Once a hesitant spirit within four walls of anxiety, here she was poised on the precipice of leadership. "Today, we stand at a crossroads," she began, her voice steady against the sea of anxious expressions. But this isn't just a presentation of facts or numbers. It's an invitation to join a journey. We're here to explore innovation without sacrificing the values that ground us. Sarah saw a few heads nod in agreement. Her vision of combining the old with the new resonated deeply, echoing the threads of past conversations with Thomas and the community at large. With every point she made, she called upon not only her knowledge, but also the collective wisdom that surrounded her, the very elements that had led to this moment. As she concluded her presentation, the room erupted in applause, signaling not just acceptance, but excitement about the path ahead. Thomas stood, clapping alongside the others, a proud smile etched across his face. The shift was profound, a collective acknowledgement that they were forging a new identity, woven together in resilience and ambition. But it was what happened next that truly solidified her growth. The mayor approached the podium, addressing the community with a nod toward Sarah. She has not only advocated for growth here, but inspired all of us to reimagine our roles within it. Let's work together to ensure this ranch, and indeed our community, thrives. Sarah felt the warmth of recognition wash over her, a tide of validation she had long dreamed of receiving. Her journey from a timid woman shackled by her fears to a respected leader was tangible. She had not just realized her own potential, but had begun to awaken it in others as well. As the meeting drew to a close and applause reverberated around her, Sarah felt solid confidence take root within. She had claimed her space in this world. The ranch was not merely a piece of land. It was a testament to growth, not just in crops, but in the human spirit. She had conquered her fears, faced the stigma, and emerged not just as a participant, but as a leader. With a heart filled with accomplishment and pride, Sarah glanced over at Thomas, who was now animatedly discussing the next steps with other community members. The camaraderie had blossomed. Together, they faced the future as partners rather than rivals, a realization that ignited her spirit more than any personal milestone ever could. Outside, the sun sank entirely, leaving behind a stunning canvas of stars in the vast Texas sky. The weight of uncertainty that had once hung over her had been transformed into genuine gratitude for the journey undertaken. Every emotional twist and turn had culminated in an unshakable sense of fulfillment. As she took a breath, taking in the soothing night air, the realization hit her with piercing clarity. She wasn't just reclaiming the land, she was reclaiming her life. Now was the moment to share her story. It was a journey of courage, growth, and determination that others needed to see. So if you believe in the power of transformation and the importance of supporting narratives of personal achievement, you need to subscribe now and be part of these incredible journeys. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible journey. And remember, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. Let's continue to champion these stories of triumph and growth together.